We're getting there. This will be the adult Bible class for December 6th. Materials are up here if you need them. Sorry, they're up front. I'm not going to hide for a minute.
Get my time already in it.
I know. I'm just sitting here eating, talking. Honey, you want to grab
It's
first?
so fast.
Right here. Just today's.
Should be two things that you need. Well, there's not enough room for you. I don't fall on that.
Which one today?
Today is chapter 10, I think.
The first things on the two on the left two are the ones you want.
Those two. Those two.
Should say 10:46 to 52, and then the
This is last
should
week's
be at
recap.
11:29 weekly recap. That is correct. It's from that session.
Got it.
So those are the two things we'll need for this morning. And I brought the little, I guess it's not so little, I brought the big, there's an app that's you can use on a Mac called, what is it? I don't remember the name of it. I can't look at it right now. That will take a graphic and make it 4 times as big. And
Really?
it makes it, adds resolution. But then I took this and printed it much bigger. And I'm surprised how well
Yeah, looks good.
it will hold.
I assumed you ordered it from somewhere like that. You did that yourself?
I'm sorry?
You printed that yourself?
Yeah, it's printed out in pieces.
I was saying I assumed that you ordered it from somewhere because it was so big.
Printed it out here.
Yeah.
And
You did
then
good.
there's another app that lets you print out on pages where, you put one in.
Yeah.
Okay. So our class today, excuse me, we're reviewing what we did last week, which is chapter 10, 32 to 45, kind of important stuff. And then we finish off chapter 10 today. And what happens when we finish off chapter 10 is we will have finished off this middle section of Mark's gospel. That's why I brought this today. We'll finish off this middle section, which these folks have entitled, What Does It Mean for Jesus to Be the Messiah? And it's a very interesting thing because then next week we go to royal entry, Jesus going into Jerusalem for his triumphal entry, however you want to speak that. And so then all of this will be the last week. From chapter 11 through the end is all the last week of Jesus' life. And so today we'll be finishing off this section with the last blind fellow. Where's the last blind fellow? He's not there. Where'd he go? I thought he was there. Okay, with the last blind fellow. It's interesting. Did you know that there's as we began this middle section, there was a blind fellow? Remember that? The fellow with the 2-part healing? That was kind of fun. 2-part healing. And so then this time we're finishing off. We'll be finishing off with the second healing, and it's just kind of interesting. And do you remember the name of the guy that we're going to talk about today? The guy who got healed from his blindness? Do we know his name? Apparently you don't know his name.
No.
Technically, we don't know his name. It calls him Bartimaeus, but Bartimaeus is not his actual name. We don't actually know his name. Bartimaeus is son of Timaeus. And so, Jesus should not be called Jesus Bar Joseph, because he would be son of Joseph. That would be his, quote, last name, if you will. So we actually don't have the guy's personal name. Can I use that? His actual personal name, like Jesus is a personal name. We don't have that. It's just kind of interesting. And only Mark includes that. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. We should probably start with a prayer and do our review over the previous section, and we'll do that now. Gracious Lord, be with us in this time. Help us as we again look at your word in the book of Mark. Open our eyes, open our hearts to what you can tell us this week, that we can take home and it can continue to change our hearts and lives. We ask this in Jesus' most precious name. Amen. So last time we had the third passion prediction. Remember, there are 3 passion predictions. And then there was the misunderstanding of the disciples. We always have misunderstandings after Jesus does one of these. 3 passion predictions. Remember the first one, Peter says, no, this shall never happen to you. I mean, it's always that way type thing. So just a couple of the points I did. I guess there are 4 pages again. I tried to cut it down more, but you can take these home and read for yourself. How about it? There are just a couple of points that I found. Well, let's see. Number 4, the disciples are very frightened about this. And it's not that they're going to Jerusalem. It seems to me that they're frightened because of Jesus. Who is he and what does it mean? They're kind of, in that awe, kind of, who is this fellow? Because they're still trying to figure it out. That's really it. What does it mean for Jesus to be the Messiah? That's the whole theme of this middle section in chapters 8 through 10. And the disciples are still getting that, still trying to understand it, and they don't fully make it, I guess, is the best way. Okay. Number 6, of Jesus' 3 prophecies of his suffering and death, this one is the most precise. And it actually adds things that we don't have on others. It talks about, sorry, I got to get to the correct page of the actual text. It says, they will hand him over to the Gentiles. And this is the first time we've heard that. And that says something about how the religious leaders and the folks who didn't want Jesus, what they thought of him, because the Messiah would be the last person that they would hand over to Gentiles, the hated Gentiles. That's really number 9, brings up that point type thing. Condemnation. If you look at what Jesus says, let me read that again. The Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death. They will hand him over to the Gentiles, and they will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. And he will rise after 3 days. It says that they'll kill him, but it doesn't mention how. But if we involve Gentiles, it's going to be through crucifixion, because that's how they would generally do this. At least that's what the Romans would do. Number 13. The second and third major passion prophecies are both followed by the disciples' misunderstandings and looking toward themselves first, and then by Jesus' instruction concerning humility and service. It's the same pattern you see. Jesus is trying to instruct them in what it means for him to be Messiah, and they're having trouble understanding it. So much so, as number 14 will mention, the sons of Zebedee still didn't get it because they wanted the right and left hand position. Right hand is the position of power, and the left hand is the friend, the closest friend. So that's what they wanted, and Jesus said, nope, you don't get that. Number 17, the request of the sons of Zebedee for places of honor in the glory of the Son of Man immediately follows Jesus' announcement that they are going to Jerusalem. After 3 days, the Son of Man will rise. Is that a logical thing to talk about after that? Is that what you would say? If you had been there, would you have gone to, well, we went the number 2 and 3 place in the kingdom? Isn't it interesting that's what they went to? It shows you where they're at. And I think it talks a little bit about then that Jesus is really kind of alone, if you think about it. They don't understand who he is exactly at this point yet. Number 19 reminds us that they don't know what they are requesting. That's what he kind of says. You do not know that in requesting to participate in my glory, you're talking about painful, difficult things. And it should have been a negative response. There's so much. Number 30. Did you ever do dibs? Do you know what dibs is? Mm-hmm. Dibs is, kids do it. Do adults do it too? Do adults do dibs? I haven't heard an adult do it. Dibs is where, if you call dibs, that means you get whatever you're talking about. So usually it involves riding in the car. That's the experience I have. Dibs, I call shotgun. You know what shotgun is? Shotgun is next to the driver. That's the position. I don't know. Why is that shotgun? Is that where the person with the shotgun would ride or something? Probably goes back to Wild West days, I suppose. And on the stagecoach, be the driver and then probably somebody with a shotgun on the right. I don't know. I'm making that up. I don't know for sure. But dibs, that's what's happening. Number 30 refers to it. I don't think the disciples, The other 10 were upset. They were upset at the 2, James and John, who thought of it before they did. That's what I think. Now, that's just me, okay? I'm sure they were much more spiritual than I would have been, that, oh, you shouldn't ask for that. But I happen to believe that they were wanted. James and John called dibs, and they asked before they did. Now, I don't know how that works, just first ones to ask. You have 3 kids. How did you do that for all these years? Who got to ride shotgun?
The oldest.
The oldest?
Well,
Well, that's unfair then, because not from a younger one. I was the youngest
But
in
you
the
had to
family.
be a certain height and weight,
That's true.
so
Worked itself out.
the oldest generally was the, got there first.
Favoritism to the old. Oh, no. So dibs. Number 31 was my little point about Jesus was alone. He really was kind of alone. And it's interesting that, we'll get there. Yeah, okay. So another one I wanted to mention. Number 42, the last one. That John, the son of Zebedee, ultimately understood Jesus' intention is clear from 1 John 3:16. It's interesting that it's 3:16 in 1 John. He laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. So John would ultimately get it. It took him a while to get there, and I don't think that should surprise us. I don't know. Would you have gotten it? Would you have gotten Jesus, do you think?
No, I think it would have been very similar.
I think it would be difficult. I think it would be difficult. Mr. Tim.
Is there any record of any of the disciples requesting one-on-one with Jesus?
Person who requested one-on-one that I can think of on the top of my head would be Nicodemus, right? Wasn't it Nicodemus in John 3? But he wasn't one of the 12 disciples. He was a follower. He was a disciple, I think you could say. But no, I cannot remember a specific request of a one-on-one. The smallest that we ever get is 3, I think, right? When we get to 3 at different points. Peter, James, and John sometimes you get. But you do not hear that. It doesn't say that it didn't occur, but it's not recorded in the Gospels that I can think of. The only one I can really think of would be Nicodemus. He comes to Jesus at night and has a discussion. And I think it's more because he's afraid he's on the ruling council and he's afraid what the others on the ruling council would think. But not that to my recollection.
When we talk about the doubts they had and the lack of understanding, you think it would be natural to say, gee, maybe I ought to have a one-on-one conversation?
I think the one who had the most conversations with Jesus, at least that we know of, would be Peter. Because Peter is the one. Michael Card has a book, I think I'm trying to remember the name of it off the top of my head. I think it's called A Fragile Stone. Because remember, Peter is called the rock. Maybe it's a fragile rock. I want to say stone, but anyway. But his premise is that Peter was Jesus' best friend. And that really it's about, the Gospels are about Jesus and Peter with the other disciples as well. But that Peter is the primary focus. Peter is the one who talks most of all. And it's not just in Mark's Gospel, right? It's in all the Gospels. So if there would be a person who asked those one-on-ones, it seems like it would be more likely, this is me guessing again, that it would be Peter, as opposed to one of the other ones.
So Peter being chosen was a decision of Jesus, not necessarily a message from God, from Jesus.
Well, I suppose you could say, since Jesus is God, it's the same thing in that regard, yeah. You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And so then you get into the whole discussion, is it the profession that Peter made, or is it the individual Peter himself? If you say it's the individual Peter himself, he was pretty rocky. He wasn't as not real good foundation stone because he kept falling, right? And it's not until after Jesus rises again that Jesus restores him those 3 times, and probably not until you actually get to Pentecost, I suppose, that Peter actually shows what he is being transformed into. So I guess that's a good way, it kind of fills in with whatever we did this morning as a message. that it took time, that God took him and continued to reform and reshape him through all of that. And he finally gets it at the end. I mean, he runs out crying because he's denied Jesus 3 times, and he said, I'm not going to do that. Everybody else can, but I will not deny, I will not. 3 times. Okay? All right. So let's go. This is actually a very short lesson, but it's very involved because there's a lot you can do with it. Let me read. This is chapter 10, verse 46. They came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples, a large crowd, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, notice it tells us that the son of Timaeus is a translation of the word Bartimaeus, because that is not his personal name. A blind beggar was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Many warned him to keep quiet, but he kept crying out all the more, have mercy on me, son of David. Jesus stopped and said, call him. So they called the blind man and said to him, have courage. Get up, he's calling for you. He threw off his coat and jumped up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus answered him, what do you want me to do for you? Rabboni, the blind man said to him, I went to see. Jesus said to him, go, your faith has saved you. Immediately he could see, and he began to follow Jesus on the road. So we're done, right? Quick, boom, gone. But there's a lot of stuff in there. Again, what's fascinating is if you go to chapter 8 of Mark's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 22. This is right before Peter's confession of Jesus. That's in verse 27 and following, and where Jesus does his first passion prediction. So it's really where this begins. This whole section is bookended by blind being given vision. Let me read the first one. This is from chapter 8, starting in verse 22. They came to Bethsaida. They brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and brought him out of the village. That's interesting that he takes him out. We talked about that. Spitting on his eyes, that sounds wonderful. And laying his hands on him, he asked him, do you see anything? He looked up and said, I see people. They look like trees walking. Again, Jesus placed his hand. They look like trees walking seemed to be that he must have been able to see sometime in his life to know what they were. I see people, he said. They look like trees walking. Again, Jesus placed his hand on the man's eyes. The man looked intently, and his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Then he, that's Jesus, sent him home saying, don't even go to the village. So at the beginning, we have Jesus healing this fellow. Notice that it's kind of a 2-stage healing, and we wonder, why is that 2-stage healing? Well, it kind of, in a way, reflects what's going on in this whole section with the disciples, doesn't it? Jesus is opening their eyes. Do they see who he is clearly? No. They kind of see he's the Messiah. That's what Peter says. You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's, we kind of see it, but he doesn't see clearly. They continue to mess up, if you will. They continue to not fully get it. 3 conversations, 3 times, they are confused and don't fully see. Here at the end, was it a 2-step healing? No. Our favorite Greek word in Mark is immediately, right? Useless, immediately. And so here at the end, it's much different. Now we're going directly into Holy Week and all that happens. And so I guess we're all going to get it. We're going to see it play out, God's story play out in its fullness here. But at the beginning, I think that one is interesting because it's trying to help us see that the disciples didn't really see. Jesus is opening their eyes, and it's taking time for their eyes to truly open to see who he is. By the end of this section, they're still not fully getting it, but they're closer to. I mean, what did we just say? What did James and John ask for at the third one? We would like to be your right and left-hand man in the kingdom, right? So is this coming kingdom of God, are they thinking about heaven, or are they thinking about going up to Jerusalem? Jesus will become the ruler, will throw out the Romans, And so it would be an earthly reign like a new David, new Solomon, all of that. Possibly that's really where their minds were. They still didn't fully get it. But here at this inn, we are having a second. So it's a wonderful way to bookend this whole center section as we move to a new section hopefully next week. So let's go back to it a little more slowly. I read through the whole thing, bless you, very quickly, but there's a lot there that we can talk about. So let's start. We'll go a little more slowly through and stop at some of these. They came to Jericho. We're in verse 46. And as he, that's Jesus, was leaving Jericho. So what do you know about Jericho?
The oldest city.
Yeah, some people say it's 9,000 years old. I don't know how they know that, but the Jericho then was the rebuilt Jericho because it had been destroyed with the Babylonians, if I remember. It's also very, very low. It's one of the lowest, if not the lowest city that there is. I had that written down, and it was important for me, but now I can't find it. Isn't that interesting? Here we go. 825 feet below sea level. That's pretty far down.
Yeah.
And so it's in a deserty region. There was an oasis there apparently where they first started. That's why the town ended up there. And it's 3,300 feet below Jerusalem because remember, you always go up to Jerusalem because it's on the top of a plateau. And so it's where they're going to up the plateau. And so they're leaving Jericho. The other thing about Jericho is that's Jesus told a parable about leaving Jericho, between Jericho and Jerusalem, right? Remember where the man is beat up and all of that? That's happened there. This is a place where there were a lot of robbers that would be there that would try to rob people. I guess that was kind of silly to say because that's what robbers do. They don't send you on your way with something else. Judy.
The mites that you showed, last week in church, the antiquities gentleman that I got them from said they were found in Jericho. And in my book here, it says Jericho was a popular resort city rebuilt by Herod the Great in the Judean desert, not far from Jordan River crossing.
Yep, it's a popular resort city. I don't know why, but it's interesting then that to go there from Jerusalem, you would have lots of robbers. So maybe the robbers are there because the rich people are going and they can figure there's an easy take there. But at this time, that they came to Jericho, people are going, there's a crowd going, and they're going, why? Again, where are we in the story? We're about to go to Holy Week, and so everyone's going to Jerusalem for Passover, right? They're all going up there, so Jesus and all of these people are going on. At the end of the lesson, we'll see that Bartimaeus, we'll call him that because that's what the text calls him. Again, not his personal name, it's his family name, if you will. That Bartimaeus follows Jesus. He follows along. Now the question that people ask, it says immediately he could see and began to follow Jesus on the road. How would you define? What does that mean? What does it mean to follow Jesus? Is he a disciple of Jesus? Is he going to be one of the people that's a disciple of Jesus then and follow him in that sense? Or is it B, he's following along with Jesus and everybody else going up to Jerusalem? Or is it C, whatever else you could come up with? No, I'm serious. I don't know. You know, people discuss that. This is one of those things, if you want to get a doctorate in theology, I bet you could write it on this topic and have a great big thing. It's better than writing on the use of the word "the" that I read somebody did once. That was crazy, but it was important in its own way. So which one it is, it kind of depends. The thing that makes me wonder if it's more than he just followed along like everybody else is because we have his name, or we have a family name. We'll call it his name. There are two other instances in the Gospels that it talks about this event. And it's interesting because, let's see, I am in Matthew chapter 20. I'll read that real quick. As they were leaving Jericho, that's the same setting, right? A large crowd followed him. There were 2 blind men sitting by the road. When they heard Jesus was passing by, they cried out, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." The crowd demanded that they kept quiet, but they cried out all the more, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." Jesus stopped, called them, and said, "What do you want me to do for me?" What do you want me to do for you? Sounds pretty much like this thing, doesn't it? Lord, open our eyes. Moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes, immediately could see, and they followed him. It's the same almost exactly, except there are two. So some would say this shows how messed up the Gospels are, because one says one, and if you go to Luke's Gospel, there's one, but it's just, there's no name listed. So could it be the same incident? Could there be two people and only mention one? Because I wonder who this guy was. This is me talking, right? I don't have any proof for any of this that I'm going to tell you. But I wonder if this Bartimaeus somehow is involved further in the Jesus story. If Peter knew, if he had some type of relationship with Peter, because remember, after this event, because remember that we talk about Mark being Peter's gospel, that Peter's stories became what Mark wrote about. Could it be that? Or could it be that somehow Bartimaeus is known to the people in Rome to whom the gospel was first written? It makes me wonder, right? These are all wonderings. I cannot prove any of this. I'm not going to write a theological dissertation on it or anything. But it almost makes sense to me that Bartimaeus was in Rome and the people, so he could say, yeah, that's me. I was there. I knew that. That's just me wondering out loud. And when you wonder out loud, it's kind of, you can get into danger pretty fast, I guess. But I have admitted just wondering, but it's interesting, of all the times it mentions, only one of them mentions his name. And so that, to me, there's something significant there. I just can't pull it out exactly what it means. Tim?
We know of when Christ approached the disciples, they were to drop their nets and follow me. Any of these other people, other than the disciples, did he ever ask anything of them to follow him?
The only one I can think of offhand would be the, quote, rich young ruler, unquote, right? Go sell everything you have, then come and follow me. Because there what he was doing is this man, Jesus looks in his heart and he sees that the thing that's most important to him, or his God, if you will, are his wealth and his possessions. And Jesus says, it's keeping in what we were talking about all that time, to become like a child, to get rid of everything and then to be totally dependent on Jesus. And he could not do that, or he was unwilling to do that. He could not bring himself to do that. So that's the only person that I could think of where he said. we had other people that did it. Let's see. Great, names dropped down. Is it Zacchaeus? Was he no, Matthew. I want to do Matthew. Matthew was a tax collector, right? Jesus said, come follow me. What did Matthew do? He left the tax booth. And the implication is he's leaving that vocation behind and following Jesus. He does have a feast for his other tax collector friends and other, quote, sinners. Remember, that's sinners as defined by the religious leaders due to oral law, not written law. But so after that, it appears he did that. So it's not everybody give up everything and follow me. But on the other hand, Peter, when they go back to Capernaum, it still seems that Peter has a house, right? They go back to Peter's house. So there's something there as well. Long answer to a short question, sorry.
Well, it appears, and over the years I thought there must have been hundreds of people following Jesus, but they never organized as disciples. Or
I think the number that I'm trying to come up with, if you read John chapter 6, it's kind of a big thing in John's gospel because there are lots of people who are following Jesus, and this is feeding of 5,000, I believe, and near the end, then Jesus is talking about eating his flesh and drinking his blood, and several people leave him at that. So there are lots of disciples who will no longer follow him. And so he turns to 12 and says, well, do you want to leave too? And it's, I believe it's Peter who says, no, Lord, you are, what is it? We sing an Alleluia, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Right? It's a direct quote from that scripture, except for the Alleluia at the beginning and end that we sing in the liturgy, but that's thrown in. So there was a larger number, but it went up and down, and by the time Jesus dies, it's much, much smaller. Remember, there were a little over, was it about 100? If you look at Acts chapter 1, you'll see that they added 3,000, and I think it was around 100 who were still following at that point. So the numbers go up and down, and then some of them, and that was the point of John chapter 6, were following because Jesus provided, they were following for the signs or the miracles, the things he did, giving them food and that type of thing. They wanted to make him, John 6, king by force, right? Wanted to have him king, something like a bread king or something like that. Yep. Okay. So all of that out of Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus. A blind beggar was sitting by the road. It's interesting to note on that one, he's sitting by the road, and then by the end of the lesson in 52, he is on the road. Just an interesting note. So he's by the road. It would not be unusual to see beggars sitting around waiting, and so the people are getting upset with what he says, right? 47. When he, that's blind Bartimaeus, heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, there's something there. He knows something about Jesus, right? Word has come to him about this fellow because he believes Jesus can do something for him. He began to cry out. That's interesting. He began to cry out. Krezo is the word to cry out. If you'll notice what it tries to do there, it emphasizes to utter aloud, often with surprise, horror, or joy. So to me it would be, he begins to shout out. He's trying to be heard over the throng. If there are all these pilgrims, they're going to be going up to Jerusalem, Jesus and all of them with it. So he's crying out at the top of his lungs. If I translate it, I would probably do that. It's probably putting too many words in the text, but he began to cry out at the top of his lungs, Jesus, son of mercy, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Son of David is interesting if you look at that. This is one of 2 times only that it's used in Mark's gospel. Much more in Matthew and Luke. I don't know why. When we hear son of David, we think of it as a messianic term. And if you read commentators, they will probably try to downplay that at this point. I don't know if that's right or not. Is he saying that Jesus is the Savior of the world? Probably not. But he knows he's something special. And if Jesus can heal people, if he can help the blind see and the deaf hear, that's one of the things that Messiah was said to have done according to Isaiah's prophecy. That's what Messiah would do. And so maybe there is more to it that he thinks Jesus is Messiah. But just from saying son of David, we're probably going too far, too fast. I mean, that's where we want to go, but maybe that's a little too much. Have mercy on me. What's the word for have mercy? Have you ever sung Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison? You have actually sung that before. Lord, have mercy upon us. Christ, have mercy upon us. Lord, have mercy upon us. Eleison is the word for mercy, and that is a transliterated Greek word that we've sang, I guess, in some liturgies, but we sing it in English if we sing it, to have mercy. And that's what he asks of Jesus. Is he asking him specifically to heal his blindness? He's asking for mercy. Now, probably, this is me saying again, probably behind that is the mercy he wants to see is to be able to see, but Jesus is going to have to bring that out of him. Did you notice it? Jesus has to ask him, what do you want me? I always thought that was a foolish question, but I think the more I think about it, he says, have mercy on me. He wants the mercy that Jesus can give. Now that's pretty impressive. He wants mercy. And many warned him to keep quiet. Warned is an okay word there, but to me it seems a little weak. They were basically telling him to shut up. I mean, we probably wouldn't translate that in the Bible, saying, they were saying, shut up. And that's really what they're doing. They went over, we've heard enough. I'm sure that they've seen many beggars along the way. That would be a normal place, especially as you're going from here, from this resort town up to Jerusalem. That's a wonderful spot if you're a beggar to be there. I bet you might have a good chance because maybe people will be thinking about giving you some alms as they're on their way to worship or something. Maybe they won't, I don't know. But they probably heard it so much. Be quiet. We don't want to hear any more. But he was crying out all the more. He kept at it. It was not a one-time, have mercy. Have mercy on me, son of David. So what happens? Jesus stops. Verse 49. And there's an imperative for it. An imperative is a command, right? And the word you, or here it would be you all, because it's plural if I remember. Yeah, second person singular. Oh, singular. So you call him. Call him. Have him come here. And that's what happens. So they called the blind man and said to him, have courage. The ESV translates it, take heart. That's probably a more natural or more normal one that we have. Take heart. You know, something, he wants you to come to him. There's a possibility here. Get up. He's calling you. And then verse 50 is kind of fun. He threw off his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. Now that looks pretty easy, but let me find my note on it. Here we go. I tell you, when you read commentators, they can go wild on some of this stuff. I'm going to go back. Here's my note. Note that the blind man asked for mercy, leaving it open-ended to the Lord to respond. And the commentator I was reading was Volz. He said, as generally psalmists do, in the psalmists they always ask about mercy, but they don't say specifically what the mercy means. So he noted these things. He does not ask for a position of glory as John and James did. That's chapter 10. He does not even ask for sight until Jesus forces his hand. That's verse 51. He is simply ready to receive blessings from the Lord's hand as befits a beggar, one who has nothing that he may offer. And in this way, this is Volz, the blind beggar in his person and in his request is the perfect expression of our status and standing before God. He has nothing he can bring. He just says, here I am, help me. Have mercy on me. Here we go. And he, upon throwing away his outer garment, Volz asks, does this act have any independent significance? Is he just taking one garment up so he can get up? Volz goes crazy on this. I'll just share this with you and you can do what you want. It may be related to Jesus' command to the 12 on their mission not to take two garments. Remember that? That's way back in chapter 6, verse 9. But that command concerned the inner garment as opposed to the external garment. It may simply denote not being encumbered by his current, soon-to-be prior situation. Seems to me he's kind of throwing a lot there on just that one thing, take off. He's trying to get up. On jumping up, so he really jumped up and he came to Jesus. And, that was fun too. In chapter 35 of Isaiah, the desert places of the Jordan will rejoice. And so Volz suggests that maybe there's a parallel there. I don't know. I think he's pulling it, but that's just me. You can do what you want. So he comes to Jesus. And he comes to Jesus, and what is he expecting? Jesus answered him. That's an interesting word, that he answered. Continued there. What do you want me to do for you? What do you wish to have me do? I would think it would be easy, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. I'd like to be able to, see. If I'm blind, hear. If I'm deaf, those things, walk. If I'm lame, seems to be a simple thing. But he has him ask for it. Why do you think he has him ask for it? Does Jesus know what he needs? Yeah, of course he knows what he needs. Why do you think he has him ask for it? It's an interesting question. You ever thought to ask that question? Do I have an answer for it?
The humility of asking for it.
Why ask? Jesus knows.
But he likes having conversations with us. So he wanted the gentleman to let him know. I mean, we try not to generalize all your prayers. Try to be specific. What's heavy on your heart? And this man sits outside of this entrance to the city every day, all the time.
So when you pray, you go with that. Do you ask for specific things or general things? Probably the answer is yes, right?
Yeah.
Both. But ask specifically. You know, I guess the more I think about it, it's all kind of floating around me, is he asked Jesus to have mercy on him. That's what he asked for. And then Jesus will clarify exactly what type of mercy does he need now. Now, I happen to believe that when he follows him, he's following Jesus as more than just walking with the crowd. Just me, I happen to think it's more than that. You're welcome to believe otherwise. You know, we get to heaven, we'll probably say, hey, where's the dude who was, where's this Bartimaeus guy? What's his real name? Tell us more about it. Did you follow Jesus as a disciple? And, are you in one of the stories with a name that we don't know who you are? I want to know those things. Of course, we want to know the stuff that we don't know, that's not there, that's left open for us. But there's something there, something about, I want to be able to see. Can you imagine not having been able to see and then suddenly being able to see? What difference would that make? Or having been, well, like the fellow that we talked about at the beginning of this whole segment, the two-part healing, apparently, I guess I'm making an assumption, it seems to be a reasonable one, that he had seen because people look like trees walking, so he kind of knows what they look like. That implies he had seen at some point in his life. And so, you've got that here, and way over here at the end, you also have this healing of giving vision so people can see. Jesus knew what they needed. As he looks into your heart, my heart, he knows what we need. He knows what gets in the way. Just like that rich young ruler, he knew what his greatest need was. And so he got him to that point kind of in a backdoor way, that he got him there to see that what he needed to get rid of, he was unable or unwilling, just couldn't bring himself to do that. Sometimes there are things that we get in our way too, right? We cry out to Jesus, have mercy on us. And then when he says, what do you want me to do for you? Well, kind of like, was it this one? Second one. Conversation number 2, where after Jesus had told them about the passion prediction, remember, they're talking about who's the greatest. So Jesus says, so what were you guys talking about on the way? We really don't want to say, right? Sometimes that's who we are and where we live. I want to see. 52. Jesus said to him, go, your faith has saved you. Immediately he could see and began to follow Jesus on the road. The word saved is an interesting one. It can be translated saved, it can be translated heal, all of those things together. And really it's used both for physical and spiritual healing or restoration. I see an element of both there. I think it's both. I think it's a both and word much of the time when it's used there. But it was, your faith has healed you. It has saved you. It has saved you from your blindness. And I think it's more than just that, because as he could see, again, it's immediate. It is total sight. It's not this two-part healing thing that we saw at the beginning. And he began to follow Jesus on the road. He goes up to Jerusalem, probably went to the temple to offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving and all. But it's just me. I'm going to follow on the side that I think he's following Jesus, because Jesus has done something pretty great for him. And I think he's beginning to see, notice how we work that in, who Jesus is. Maybe he really is the one who we're expecting. But the story, the lesson ends there. And the next thing we do, we're riding into Jerusalem. That's where we'll be next week. The man comes to see, and we're led then to see who Jesus is through this whole section. At the beginning, near the beginning, this is my beloved son, and listen to him. We're told to listen to him, and we've been listening through these 3 conversations, the 3 passion predictions, So have the other disciples. They haven't gotten it yet. Their eyes are starting to open, but it's not fully clear. And now it will be. Notice, for this healing, he sent him home. Don't even go into the village. Here, Jesus doesn't send him home. He didn't say, you can't follow me. He's coming to when it's all coming to fruition. The full thing is coming together right now. And so he can come on the way because this is for him too. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I think we covered everything. Probably some more stuff next time because I'll look at the notes and go, oh, I should have said this, should have said that. Any other thoughts you want to talk about? Stuff that comes up. Mr. Mark.
Something somewhat superficial. Do you think there's any significance to the whole tree, the two-stage shield guy that saw the people as trees? Is there any kind of metaphorical, do you think, hidden message behind that, or just a benign description?
I'm sorry, I have to talk louder for me. My ears aren't working well.
I was just asking about the guy the blind man who saw the people as trees. Do you think there's any significance to that description, or is that just benign?
I don't know.
Like a metaphor kind of thing, or some.
I see something. I don't know. To me, if we're gonna, you could come up with something there, I suppose. But I think at that point we'd be reaching. It's like me saying, the guy's named Bartimaeus that's listed here, so he's somebody important. I'm probably reaching pretty far. I admitted that, though, right? I admitted it several times in there, but I guess I admit it because I want it to be true. Sometimes we want something. We want that to be true. There's something there. That's another one of the things. I'm going to write that one down and ask the question. Why? We're thinking that maybe the reason it took twice is it's a metaphor for the disciples not being able to see who Jesus is. Is that right? We could ask that question. So when you have eternity, you get to go through the stories all in detail. Probably they'll play in surround sound vision type thing. You can just click it and watch. I don't know. Could watch the whole thing. Yes, Judy.
I'm reading Paul Myers in The Fullness of Time, and he starts out, with the birth of Christ, and then he goes into the Easter and goes through that. But one of the things he talked about was how, in the fullness of time, this is the perfect time that Christ was born, with the Roman roads and with the different travel and with the way that they could communicate. So do you think that some of these people heard of Christ or heard of this Messiah or through these 3 years, and we still don't know if he actually had a ministry of 3 years? I mean, there's so many things that you keep, like you say, you bring up, and then you could go down one road or you could go down. But do you think that some of these folks, especially blind or disabled or those with conflicts, would have heard of this person, even though Christ told them not to tell anybody, or that the disciples weren't sure how far they should go in talking about it? Do you think that here now that actually Christ or the Savior was in front of him, he put it all together, like, this is, wow, I have to jump on this. Or in here, in this commentary, it says that he might have known about Christ from other travels. He probably didn't travel being blind. But other people, when we were in Israel, I mean, they're always having that dark coffee, and the men meet in the mornings, and there's a lot of that cultural thing where they talk. Do you think he might have known, and now all of a sudden, oh my gosh, he's in front of me?
Well, it seems to me that people, up in Galilee, people knew who Jesus was. They would hear Jesus, boom, people are going there because they've heard the stories of what he's done. Oftentimes when Jesus says, don't tell anybody, they tell people all the more. If you'll notice that, that's one of the true things. How about when the little girl was brought back to life, Jesus tells the family, don't tell anybody, but they already know she's dead, right? People know she's dead because they have the professional mourners there mourning, and suddenly the girl's alive. I think it was, don't tell anybody, so basically I can get out of here so I'm not surrounded, and because people, it goes back to the John 6 that we mentioned before. What are they coming for? Are they coming for what Jesus truly came to offer, which is a restored relationship for God, or are they looking for food? Are they looking for the physical healing? Is that what they're after? So the question could be asked, he probably heard, he seemed to know who Jesus, well, he knows Jesus, he's Jesus of Nazareth. He knows something about him, where he came from. He's heard about this fellow. He's calling him son of David, which could be significant. I mean, you just don't call anybody son of David. I wouldn't call you son of David, maybe daughter of David, but son of David seems to have some significance. We put more on it possibly than they did. So there's some knowledge that he's done things. And so at bare minimum, this is Jesus. Well, I've heard that Jesus has healed blind and healed lame and all of this. Maybe he can do that for me. At bare minimum, that would be true. There's the possibility that he was farther along. Oftentimes, blind people seem to know more. They seem to see more than the people who see. Who was the fellow who was blind? Was it? No. The guy had to go down and wash himself in Siloam. Do you want to become his disciples too? Type thing. He could see. He saw who Jesus was when the religious leaders could not. So we run into that a lot too. There's a good possibility that maybe he saw more. Maybe he was more spiritually attuned than the other people around, and that's why all he had to ask was for mercy. Have mercy on me. Well, if I see a blind person, I had the power to heal. The mercy, first thing I would think of is I would take away his impediment that was impeding his entire life, right? I mean, because that pretty much affects you. Our neighbor was having trouble with his eyes. One eye couldn't see out of very well, and he had cataract surgery on the other, and something went wrong, and now he can't see, period. I mean, a man who's older than I am, and I'm pretty old, I think I'm 65 or something, and some of you will go, oh, that's young, and others will say, that is young. But anyway, so, that changes your life. Have mercy on me. What do you want? I'd like to be able to see. I think that follows perfectly. So I think there was something, he knew something about Jesus, yes. I think it would be hard. Well, the religious leaders were sending spies, I guess I can call them that, up to Galilee to find out what this Jesus is up to. So they've heard about him, they know him, and they're really going to hear about him coming up real fast, because he's going to say some things. Chapter 11 and 12 really is Jesus talking to them, and they're not appreciating what he's saying, and basically that's where we're going to find out for sure that Jesus is going to die. I think Tim has a question, then we're over our time, and you need to stop.
Well, then it would appear that disciples really never fully appreciated that the Lord could look at like the rich man and look into his soul and know exactly what was holding him back. So that was, I guess if they could have done that, they would then know for sure who Jesus was.
I think the disciples don't fully get it until Pentecost, fully.
Yeah.
I think they get it when they see and put their hands in his side. When Jesus goes to them on Easter Sunday, in the afternoon, whatever, later that day, he says, here, are my hands inside. I think, just me again, I think they did that. I mean, because then when Thomas asks, here's my hand inside, I don't think Thomas did it then. Again, that's just me, that's how I'm interpreting it. You're free to do that. But at that point, yeah, they're going, he is alive and everything. So I think they're getting it then. But still, when they go to his ascension, some doubted, right? It says some doubted. So there's still some doubt someplace, but the doubt ends with Pentecost. After Pentecost event, it seems that there's no doubt. Interestingly, James and John, I think we said that last week, first and last of the 12 to die, right? First was James, the last was John. So they got it, and John got it ultimately, like from, is it 1st or 2nd John 3:16? I think it's 1st John. We're gonna have to stop, because we're supposed to stop at 10:30 to let them in, and it's almost 11:45, so we need to stop now, so they can finish up getting ready for service, which starts in 15. Let's have a short prayer. Gracious Lord, open our hearts. Thank you for being with us. Help us to take what we've talked about today and put it into practice in our lives. Help us to chew on it and integrate it into who we are. We ask it in your most precious name. Amen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and whomever is watching online.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for turning on these. What do? Press it down? One of them, or do you have to press all?